Have you ever looked at a person who is clearly not burdened with an excess of intelligence and thought, how is he doing well? He doesn't worry about the climate. He doesn't read the news at 3 in the morning. He doesn't build disaster scenarios in his head. He doesn't ask himself if there is any meaning in his work, his relationships, his existence. He just lives, and apparently not bad. The question is, why? The standard answer is because he's a fool. He doesn't understand how the world works. He cannot see the depth of the problems. But what if the standard response is the defensive reaction of an intelligent person who doesn't want to admit an inconvenient truth? What if fool is not a diagnosis and the choice, conscious or not, it's a choice, getting out of the game that you, smart, keep playing and lose? Today, we will analyze more than just everyday surveillance. We will analyze the mechanism. Why does awareness, intelligence, and depth of perception of the world often correlate with anxiety, unhappiness, and a sense of meaninglessness, while their absence correlates with peace and contentment? It's not a question of who's smarter. It's about the price you pay for seeing the world the way it is, and about whether this price is worth it, what you get for it. Folk wisdom on this topic is rich. If you know less, you sleep better. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Happiness is in simplicity. Most people explain it this way. The fool doesn't understand the scale of the problems, so he doesn't worry. A smart person sees everything and therefore suffers. The logic is clear, almost comforting. She says, yes, it's harder for you, but you see the truth. You're deeper. You're better. This explanation is very convenient. It turns suffering into a reward, as a sign of being chosen. A smart person suffers, which means he's smart. A fool is happy, so he's a fool. Beautiful design. It's a pity that she's about half wrong. That's what this logic misses. She suggests that the suffering of an intelligent person is an inevitable consequence of intelligence, a side effect of depth, like a headache after hard work. But this is not the case. Suffering smart is not a side effect. This is the result of how smart people use their intelligence against themselves. An intelligent person knows how to build models of the future, calculate risks, to see how something can go wrong. It's a useful skill, evolutionarily valuable. But the same mechanism that helps you avoid real mistakes is equally happy to generate imaginary disasters at 3 o'clock in the morning, out of nothing. The fool doesn't suffer less because he's more stupid. He suffers less because he doesn't have the self-tormenting tool that you've been honing for years and call analytical thinking. The difference is not in the depth of perception. The difference is where the tool is pointing. There is a concept in psychology, psychological distance. It's how abstractly you perceive an event. A distant future, a foreign country, a hypothetical scenario. It's all a long distance. When the distance is high, you think about things in general terms, broadly but superficially. When the distance is low, you're in the details, and the details are usually disturbing. A smart person works from a low distance by default. He doesn't just hear climate change. He specifically imagines what will happen to his city in 30 years. He doesn't just know that the economy is unstable. He models how it will affect his family, his job, his pension. It's not depth for the sake of depth. This is constantly being in the mode of maximum specificity about everything that is potentially dangerous. The fool lives in high-range mode by default, not because he's unable to think concretely, but because he doesn't have the habit of doing it automatically about everything. This is not stupidity. This is a different mode of operation, and in a sense, it's more economical. Socrates is one of the most famous intelligent people in history. He was the first to formulate a simple idea. I know I don't know anything. It sounds modest. In fact, it was a declaration of war to everyone who was satisfied with their understanding of the world.
Socrates walked around Athens and asked people questions, politicians, poets, artisans, and I found out that they didn't understand what they were talking about, that their confidence is an illusion, that there is emptiness behind the appearance of knowledge. The result? He was tried. He was found guilty of corrupting youth and godlessness and sentenced to death. The Athenians who killed him lived longer, they slept better, they did not worry about the nature of virtue. Socrates knew too much, and this knowledge made him unbearable to a society that preferred a comfortable illusion to an inconvenient truth. This is not a metaphor. This is literally what happens to people who see too clearly. Society does not reward them, it isolates them. Look at how the algorithms of social networks work. They don't sell you information, they're selling you fortunes. The alarm, indignation, fear, superiority, these are the most sticky emotions. They keep you in the feed the longest. An intelligent person who follows the news, understands politics, understands how the world works, consumes it all. He is convinced that it is useful, that awareness is power. But what is actually happening, he gets a dose of anxiety every few minutes. His nervous system is operating in a chronic stress mode. He is angrier, more anxious, and more unhappy, and at the same time sincerely believes that this is the price for understanding reality. A fool doesn't read the news, not because he doesn't care, but because he has no conviction that this is his duty. He did not build an identity around a person who knows. The algorithm does not make money from it, and he, by chance, without any philosophy, found himself in a healthier position. I'm not going to build a conspiracy theory here, but I will ask a question that is worth asking. Who benefits from a culture in which intellectual suffering is a sign of depth, in which anxiety is a sign that a person understands everything, in which peace and contentment is suspicious, almost shameful? The pharmaceutical industry? Antidepressants are one of the best-selling classes of drugs in the world, and their consumption is growing among the educated segments of the population. The media? An anxious viewer is a loyal viewer. He comes back again and again because he needs to know how it ended. Educational institutions? A person who is convinced that his knowledge is insufficient is an excellent buyer of courses, books, and subscriptions. I'm not saying it's a conspiracy. I'm saying that this is a system that has accidentally or intentionally created a culture where smart people pay for their intelligence with chronic discomfort and consider this the norm. And the fool just didn't fit into this system, and he lives for himself. Now let's take a step back and take a broader look. Blessed are the poor in spirit is one of the most quoted and least understood phrases in Western culture. Most people read it as a call to stupidity. But in the context of the Sermon on the Mount, it's about something else. It's about people who aren't overwhelmed by their own concepts of how the world should work, who are not caged by their beliefs. Almost all mystical traditions, Buddhism, Sufism, Christian mysticism, say one thing: intellectual knowledge creates a barrier between man and reality. The more concepts you have in your head, the thicker the wall. This is not propaganda of stupidity. This is the observation that the conceptual mind, for all its usefulness, creates suffering as a byproduct. There is a common belief that educated people are more difficult to manage. They are more critical. They ask questions. This is true, but only partially. An educated person really asks questions, but he also invested deeply in the system: university, career, mortgage, reputation. He has too much to lose, and so he asks questions, but he doesn't do anything drastic. A fool who has nothing to lose and who doesn't understand why he shouldn't sometimes does things that an educated person only discusses over dinner. History is full of examples when revolutions were made by people without a diploma, and the intelligentsia wrote manifestos and waited for the right moment. There is a whole science, the economics of happiness, and one of her most stable discoveries is this. Above a certain level of income and education, the correlation between them and subjective happiness weakens. It doesn't disappear, weakens.
People with higher education have higher expectations of life on average. They compare themselves more with others. They feel more acutely the gap between where they are and where they should be. The fool, in the good sense of the word, is not burdened by this gap. He doesn't have the concept of the person I was supposed to be, and that's why he doesn't suffer from not becoming one. That's what I've come to by analyzing it. Fool is not about intelligence, it's about the attitude to the rules of the game. A smart man accepted the rules. He's in the game. He chases success by other people's criteria, worries about other people's ratings, builds himself according to other people's patterns, and calls this a conscious life. The man we call a fool simply did not accept these rules, not because he rejected them philosophically, but because they didn't reach him. Or maybe he decided it wasn't his game. And that's the inconvenient truth. You're calling him a fool because that's the only way to explain to yourself why he's happy and you're not. This is protection, a way to not admit that maybe your game isn't the only one, and that getting out of it is not a defeat. Socrates knew this. He was talking about people who live in a cave and mistake shadows for reality. But he forgot to say something important. People in the cave live longer on average, and happier, because they don't get killed for coming out into the world. Maybe wisdom is not to come out of a cave and suffer from bright light. Maybe the wisdom is to know that there is a cave, and choose consciously, stay or leave, and what to pay for. The next time you look at someone and think how well he's doing because he's a fool, stop for a second and ask yourself another question. What game are you playing? Who made up her rules? And when was the last time you checked, are you participating in it because you want to, or just because you don't know how to get out?